Hello, and welcome to the Christian Habits Podcast. This is the podcast that will help you break free from your strongholds, draw closer to God, and develop habits that will help you love God and others better. And now, here's your host, Barb Raveling.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have all of you here today. And I'm excited to have Samantha Decker here today, who is a new author. Samantha is a wife, a mom, a writer, Bible teacher, and above all, she is a follower of Jesus. Samantha is passionate about encouraging believers to deepen their walk with Jesus through discipleship relationships and an unrelenting love for the Word of God. She and her husband, Dustin, live in Oklahoma and enjoy serving in their local church, trying new restaurants, and adventuring with their 3 rambunctious boys and a baby girl. Welcome to the podcast, Samantha. It's good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so good to be here.
Good. And it's so fun to talk to new authors. I'm always curious with new authors as to, what kind of a book do you choose for your first book, and why do you choose that book? So I love her new book is called Unhurried, an invitation to slow down, create margin, and surrender control to God. So why don't you tell us a little bit about why you decided to write that book?
Yeah. So when I started writing, I had no idea this was actually a book. Instead, it was really a step of obedience of what God had called me to do. And it happened when it was about, honestly, 7 years ago now, when I was in the middle of a season trying to do everything. I was a mom, I was working full time, I was serving in the church and doing all of these good things. And yet the Lord used a verse in the Old Testament book of Haggai, chapter 1, verses 5 and 6, where he said, "Consider your ways," to really get my attention. And in that book, he's talking to the Israelites who were planting their own vineyards and who were building their own houses. And yet God had told them to rebuild the temple. So they were busy with all of the wrong things. And when I learned that, the Lord just kind of spoke to me and said, "Samantha, you've got to slow down and start pursuing my purposes over your plans." And as I started learning what that meant and how to do that, it really became this book that God helped me to develop. And it was really written as a response to that.
Okay. And was it something that you learned how to change in your own life? Because it sounds to me like you're starting from a hurried perspective and learning how to live more of an unhurried life. Is that what happened as you progressed through this?
Yes, that's the goal for sure, to live unhurried. And, I joke with people that know me. I'm like, I'm still the person who is trying to, hurry and get my kids in the car, or who's rushing to the next meeting. And the Lord has given me so much grace in learning what it looks like to slow down. And it's more of a perspective shift, and to see, okay, God, what do you have for me today? What is it that you want me to do? Instead of obsessively over planning my days or trying to control my situations. It's a moment by moment decision to pursue God and his purposes instead of being so consumed with my own pace.
Okay, so it kind of sounds like it's something you're doing in fellowship with God too, and visiting him throughout the day as you decide what to do and how to handle the day.
Yes, I love that, in fellowship with God, because that's definitely what it is. It's seeking God and meditating on who he is first and foremost, and his plans. And so in the book, I share a lot about what it is to create margin within your day and within your schedule, so that you can better focus on what God has for you instead of being so caught up with your own purposes or plans that you're missing out what God's told you to do.
Okay, so how do you create margin in your day?
It's a great question, and I'm honestly still learning. But one of the few things the Lord has shown me is that it really starts with small steps of obedience. And so, for example, I love the story in the Old Testament when the Israelites have been wandering in the desert and they're getting ready to go conquer the land, and they're going to cross the Jordan. And it says that the priests dipped their toe into the water before they parted. And so it's that dipping of a toe, I think, into a slower paced life that God calls us to do. And so for me, what that looked like was very slowly learning to, okay, create some time to intentionally set aside and spend time with the Lord each day, to do things that make me slow my pace. For example, when somebody called me, on the phone, maybe a friend is calling and you're like, oh, I don't have time to pick up right now. But instead, the Lord was like, okay, let's pick up the phone. There's a reason. And instead, trying to serve whoever that may be, or listen, or pray, or take some time to say, God, what do you have for this conversation right now? So I don't have a like one size fits all solution to live this unhurried, slow life. But what I do have is some things the Lord has shown me that start with keeping our eyes on Him and taking little steps of obedience.
Yeah, I like what you did later on in the book towards the end where you talked about people in three different stages of life and just some tips that they could have for planning their days. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I'm a very practical person. And as I was writing, I was like, how can I both focus on the theology of what this is and point to Jesus along the way and keep it very scripture filled? But how can I say, okay, no matter what stage of life you're in, no matter what your season is, there's a way you can slow down. So I kind of break it into three categories, as you said, of either you work full time, you are in between somewhere of, maybe working, maybe not working, maybe having something, or you stay at home fully. So that means you're retired, you stay at home with your kids, you're in between jobs, something like that. And what I'm hoping that people learn from this chapter specifically is that no matter which one of those you fit into, there's a way to create margin and there's a way to slow down and keep your eyes on Him in that season. And so I kind of walk through what are some obstacles in that season, some challenges you may face, and then what are some benefits to it. So, for example, if you do stay at home right now, how could you use the flexibility of your schedule to maybe ask the Lord to give you discernment what you should say yes, to, and what you should maybe say no, not right now to? Or if you work full time, how can you use the rigidity of your schedule to maybe do the same things every day? Like, for example, if you have to be at work at a certain time in the morning, can you stop by the same coffee shop and build a relationship on your way there? Or can you use the hour before that to pray or meditate on the scripture or something like that, to use whatever your schedule looks like to create margin, slow your pace, and keep your eyes on the Lord?
Yeah, that's interesting. It seems like I remembered as I was reading that, and I can't remember if you put it in the book or if it's just something you made me think about, that in my stage of life, almost one of my biggest dangers is too much unstructured time. So it's not that I don't have lots to do, but the time is so unstructured that I have to figure out how to, keep walking with God and, live at a good pace, a good rejuvenating pace, still getting work done, still having rest time. Do you have anything on that?
Yeah, I love how you brought in work there and you brought in rest, because what we see modeled for us in scripture is both, right? If you think about Jesus, he was constantly in his ministry working in the sense of, meeting people, healing, performing miracles, preaching, and then you'd see he'd get away to be with the Father. There's a passage, it's early in Mark 2, where it talks about Jesus even after he had spent time, healing. It says before it was even light outside, he got up and went away to a secluded place to be with the Father. And so I think when we look at our days in unstructured times, especially, you say, okay, God, what is my work for today? What do you have for me today? And then how can I know that it is enough? Instead of constantly trying to say, oh, I should do more, I need to fill this time better, manage this more, knowing that rest is also a good gift and the Lord has given it to us. And if we can rest well and work well, then we are keeping our eyes on Him and slowing our pace in the sense of making sure we are doing what God has called us to do for each day.
So it's so interesting because we are recording this interview at my daughter's house, and I've been helping out with my little grandson, Theo. And so the last couple of days, my only job has been to watch Theo, and he is 10 months old. And when you have a little 10-month baby and you're watching them throughout the day, they're kind of like the picture of the unhurried life. I mean, he lays there, he plays with his toes, he crawls across the floor, he's happy, he's delightful, and all we have to do is feed him and, get him down for his naps and play with them. And I think then we go out through life and we're like, oh, I've got to do this, this, and this. And even in those childbearing years, I remembered you have all your kids, but you're still thinking you have to get so much done, when it seems like God might say, hey, just what do you need to focus? What's the one thing you need to get done today? In fellowship with him, keeping him first, but still living with joy and still getting work done and not just always being indulgent. So.
Yes, I love that picture of a child. Because you're right. I think that we kind of lose that childlike um, perspective on our day the more and more that we go on and we have things to do. And that doesn't mean we don't, have responsibilities or do them well, but it means that, like you said, we're delighting in the Lord along the way. We're seeking to, I talk about abiding with Him, to be held and to remain in who Jesus is and what He's done for us. And we can approach the work He's given us with joy because of what He's done. And so I think you're right. If we can watch a child a little bit more, we probably would have a little bit better perspective on what it is we should do with our day.
And do you think it's only people who are more accomplishment driven that struggle with the hurried life? Or do you think people who are more, hey, let's just sit back and have fun, do those people also struggle with the hurried life?
I think we all do, honestly. And it's partly because of our culture. No matter, type A, type B, wherever you fall, really our culture has told us if you do more, if you achieve more, you will be more successful. And so I think we have to battle what culture is telling us and compare it to what the Word of God says. And then I think it's more than that. Anytime we are trying to achieve to the point that we aren't asking God what He wants us to do with our day, or we aren't surrendering to His purposes, we really are taking on kind of this me mindset, one that says, the way I want things is more important, God, than what you have for me. And I think that's something we all struggle with because we all have a sin nature. So it's not just those of us that like to plan and control, although we probably lean a little bit more towards this fast paced life. It's anyone who struggles with sin, which is all of us, and anyone who says, God, I don't like the way things are going right now, or I don't like this plan for you have for me. Instead, how can I try to manipulate the situation to be what I want it to be? And so if that's something that you ever struggle with, then I think that you could say, I also struggle with hurry.
Yeah. And I also think too, because I am a type B person, and what happens is I'll procrastinate things because I'm too busy having fun. And then that leads to having a hurried life last minute because something is due and I haven't gotten it done soon enough. So like the more I learn to overcome procrastination and be disciplined, the less hurried of a life I live because I don't have to rush last minute. I don't have to have all that stress of, feeling hurried.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's exactly right. My sister and I, we joke all the time because I'm the type A and she's the type B. And, all the time I'm like, Abby, that's my sister. Like, why aren't you doing this? And she's like, well, I'll do it later. And I'm like, Abby, don't put off tomorrow what you can do today. But she, on the other hand, is having to encourage me of, you don't have to do it all today, Samantha, slow down. And there's, the work for today is sufficient for today. And so I think sometimes we need to remind each other of these truths, no matter type A, type B. We kind of need each other to be able to focus more on what Jesus has for us each day.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's like we have different weaknesses that keep us from living the life He wants us to live. And we can strengthen each other, when we're around people who have different strengths and weaknesses.
Completely. And I love that you brought that up, Barb, too, because one of the ways we can better live unhurried is knowing what our gifts are and what spiritual gifts God has given us, because that helps us discern when should we say yes to things and when should we maybe say, somebody else is so gifted in this. How about I allow them to do that and instead focus on what you have for me and my giftings?
Yeah, that's good. I remember too, when I was about your age and your stage of life, I was a people pleaser. And so whenever somebody asked me to do something, I always said yes. I didn't even consider no an option. I just felt like I had to say yes. And I was saying yes too many times to things God didn't want me to say yes to because I had 4 kids at home. I was busy and I didn't have as much time to say yes to all those things. So I think that's something too, like being discerning. What do we say yes to? What do we say no to? So, how do you know when you have a good amount in your life to where you have the margin, but you're also not just completely focused on entertainment and fun and having the easy life?
Mm. That's a good question because I think you're right. It is such a balance. Like fun and joy like is a gift from the Lord. But what we can see is if you take some time at the end of your day to look back and say, okay, what did I do for the Lord? Did I spend time with him? Did I spend time in the word? Was I prayerful today? Did I serve somebody today? Did I work as though working unto the Lord and not just for myself today? And if you can say yes to those things, then I would argue you've had a day well spent. Not necessarily a perfect day, right? We're not there yet, and we're going to continue to be trying to be more like Jesus every day until he returns. But those things that matter eternally should be good markers for you to reflect on and say, okay, I did do things that were eternally significant today, instead of I was so focused on me today or my plans today that I didn't even ask what you wanted me to do today, God. And so that would be my encouragement, is to, at the end of the day, reflect and look and see, and then try to be a little bit, more intentional tomorrow.
That's good. Okay. And then what would you do the next day? So you said great for the end of the day to kind of think about that. So let's say I'm listening to this podcast. I'm a person who does tend to be too hurried. I'm always frantic. I guess you wouldn't always have to be frantic, but you're just trying to get too much done and you don't want to slow down. You love accomplishment. You love getting things done, checking off the list. So what is one step that person could take to start slowing down a little bit and have a more sustainable life?
Mm. So I would start with your spiritual disciplines of time in the Word, prayer, solitude, even. And then on the other hand, fellowship. Do you have those believers around you who are, like we talked about, are kind of balancing you out and helping push you to be more like Jesus? So I think the very first thing I would encourage somebody to do is, first thing right when you wake up, whether that's, from your alarm clock or a crying baby or the sunshine or whatever it may be, instead of reaching for your phone or your calendar or whatever you think, I'm going to have to do this and this and this today, spend just a few quiet minutes to pray, to maybe spend a little time in the Word, to say, God, what do you have for me today? And that question alone helps to orient ourselves to be more in line with who God is and what he has for our day. Because if you approach it of, God, I have this to do today, you're really forgetting who he is. He's Lord. He is over your day. He's sovereign over all. And we want to submit to that. And so by saying, God, what do you have for me today? We're seeing ourselves under his lordship and saying, I'm going to do what you have for me today. I want to be obedient. And that prayer alone, I think, can help us to better take the steps we need to live a slower life and to focus on Jesus each day.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really great advice. I do that sometimes when I'm working, I'm having a work problem. If I sit down, take time to pray and ask, God to help me. And I feel like so often, I have a thought to what I need to do next. And I think that would happen a lot in the morning too. When you asked him that, sometimes you might not hear anything from him, but a lot of times you will. So it's good to ask that question. And I think we do get too caught up and we forget to sit down and ask God for help on a practical level, what he wants us to do.
Mm, yeah, I agree. And it's just a little thing, little things can make big differences, and they compound, right? When we start to do it, all of a sudden we start to do it a little more, and then we're a little bit further down the road.
Yeah, develop a habit. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good. Well, I think you have a lot of practical ideas and helps for how to live more of an unhurried life. And why don't you let us know where people can find you online and where they can find your new book?
Yeah, I would love that. I'd love to connect with you. I'm on Instagram at Samantha Decker Writes, or I send out a monthly newsletter where I really love to just write there a little more intimately. And so you can sign up on my website, samanthadeckerwrites.com. And then the book is available most places books are sold. It's through Moody Publishers, so it's on their site, but you can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble, any of those places. And I just actually found out today the audiobook is now available. So you can
Oh,
get that on Audible too, which
that's,
is fun.
oh yeah, that is nice. That's great. Okay, well, thank you for being on the podcast, Samantha. It was great to visit with you.
It was so fun to be here. Thanks for having me.
Okay, and thank you everybody else. Thanks you guys for being here, listening in, and I will look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Christian Habits Podcast. If you'd like more help with stopping and starting habits, check out Barb's blog at www.barbraveling.com.